Welcome everyone to another process video, one of a number in my series using the mix-ins from the March-April catalogue. Today my intention for these photos of my son and my husband on motorbikes, I was thinking of using some of this black paper here that comes in the mix-in. What I have started to do, and particularly for these videos, but I think it's a really great practice, is just to spend 5 or 10 minutes having a look through my products and my tools and deciding these are my parameters for my layout. And it's really working for me. So some of these things may get included, some of them may not. I know that at worst, or at least, I will be cutting some words out of this mix-in. And I do love the mix-in paper itself. I wanted to have a try of using the Dot Slimline. These are designed to go with our Slimline cards, but I love the texture that this creates, and it's sort of, you can't really see it in the photos, but my son's protective gear is like a mesh, and it reminds me of that, and I just think it will create a great texture. There is another mix-in in here, which initially I was going to use the paper, but I think it's too light. But I do think that possibly the stars may make it in there. When the stars was too, or sorry, the grey paper was too light, I then remembered the black and white that's in the Smarty Pants, which is our annual catalogue at the moment, which is a school base. But to me, it reminds me of sort of splotched mud, and they're not out. I mean, they're outdoors and they're in our property, but we're not actually in the mud. But sort of that gravelly look. I definitely, and what this was driven around was, excuse the pun there, the Where the Road Ends stamp and thin cut set. So I have already cut out 3 motorbikes here, or motorbike riders, and I know what I want to do on this side, which is why I've already pre-framed these on white cardstock, and I'm going to bring out a little bit of red. My husband's bike is also a sort of a burgundy colour, so I've gone for the scarlet. This is probably a brighter red, but I've sort of gone for something midway. I definitely would like to use the wheel or tread mark here, and I had just a little bit of play to see what that might work out like. So that's some of my main parameters, and you might wonder what on earth this In Full Bloom card making stamp set is doing here. Well, imagine these 3 photos down here on a large film strip. So I'm going to be using this just the edges, which is one of the main reasons that I bought it for, and I'm going to be making a film strip down there. So I think that's where I'll start, because this I have more of an idea what I'm doing with. The photos were taken at 2 different times, but I'm sort of going to blend them together and talk about, you know, how, you know, my husband is a rider and therefore my son has become a rider too. So let's get started. When you're wanting to have a diagonal line completely from top to bottom on a 12-inch piece, you're going to need a piece which is greater than 12 inches. So initially when I was thinking about creating this film strip, my mind just went to, you know, putting these along here and then cutting that off. But of course, when I turn that on the angle, it's not going to go from top to bottom, and that's what I had in my mind. I went off and cut using the thin cuts here and my die cutting machine, and I've got a continuous piece by holding it over the edge. It's not perfect. Now, if you look too closely, you'll see the little bumps where I've done the join, but that's okay. This is longer than 12 inches. So what I recommend, and I've done it on the other side already, I've worked out my angle, is actually you'll use a little bit more cardstock to do it. But where this will go is cutting it on the angle on the page. So I want them to go something like that. And then the other half of this film strip is going to go down there, and then this will be cut off. So you see here that way I'm going to have a film strip that goes from top to bottom. I'll work out what I'll do in here, or whether I'll separate them a bit. I'm not really sure yet, but I did want the film strip to go all the way up to the top. So I'm going to speed it up now, and we'll make progress on the page. So I'm placing all the photos down on the black diagonal piece, and first though I'm going to cut the strip off this 12-inch film strip that I've created. I'm not being particularly careful because I know I'm going to be able to tuck that in underneath the photos and the larger mat. So I'm ready now. So off camera I have cut off the left hand side of that large photo mat. And initially I was going to keep on these extra little tab pieces because I thought I could just tuck them in underneath, but decided they would probably get in the way. So I'm sort of positioning it now. And I'm not much of a glue person. I'd rather use a roll-on adhesive, but this is something I really need to use the glue for. I have an all-purpose mat that I use for these things, and I have the mini piece which I've cut up so that I can just put it on part of my page. And I have the multi-bond glue pin here, which I'm just sort of dabbing and dragging along. The point is also good for just spreading it out. I don't need a lot of glue, and just trying to be careful as much as I can to keep it on my messy mat, as I call it, and getting ready to stick that down. I just sort of placing that along the same general line so that will be lined up, and I will stick that larger black mat over the top when I'm finished. So I'm just placing it now a little bit further to the right than I need to, so that as I stick glue on the left hand side, I'll have a little bit of extra space just to place that back over the top, and it will then sit just ever so slightly over both the left film strip and the right film strip, so it'll hide any of those imperfections where I've cut the little sides off. Just about to place that down, and I realise that I've got the rough side facing out, so I've had to quickly turn that around, and then just making sure that that's going to be in exactly the right place. And I had a near disaster there moving that film strip after I'd taken that out, but somehow I managed to still keep it in place, just double checking there before I take that away to get ready to put adhesive on that too. First I've just used a little scrap of cardstock. I found my fingers are a bit sticky and just a little bit of glue peeking through. I decided that pushing that down with a piece of cardstock was good idea to do that. And then I do, after it's dry, just use a little bit of the rub and remove to get a little bit of excess glue off. Is always a great tool to have. Now I've got all that messy glue part out of the way, I can move back to using my roll-on adhesive, which is my comfort zone, stick that main piece down, and then I'm ready to move on to the rest. Okay, so I've got this main piece set up nicely here, and that's going to help me decide what to do here. So now I'm starting to audition the pieces of Smarty Pants. I've got a 4x6 piece there, and I've got two end pieces of the Dots Slimline, because I've got an idea for the bottom and how I want to place these motorbike riders, but I sort of need to know how much space that's going to need. And just to start to get a visual of it, how it all lays out, I'm just laying out some of the other pieces as well. I know I've got to put a title up in this left-hand corner where I've placed another piece of the Smarty Pants, but I'm really not sure how that will go just yet. So just starting to lay these all out to see if I can formulate what it will look like in my mind. Part of my idea for the bottom is to create this ramp look, but I can see that the motorbike on the right is really starting to touch that other piece, which wasn't in my vision. And I'm playing around with that, trying to squeeze up the top, which really I'm not that totally happy with, but I do come up with a solution to actually drop the ramp or the hill to give me more room, and I'm much happier with that once I do that, because now it doesn't look so cramped. So off camera I've recut that piece and stuck it on the right hand side, and then I'm just trying to recut and reposition, make sure it's the same size for the left hand page, which is just flipped over, sort of a mirror like view. Placing that with some adhesive, and although I have double checking everything, when I put it all down it's not quite right, so I think I do grab my other page just to double check. It's still just a little bit out, so I'm just using my tweezers to tuck my finger behind there. The beauty of the adhesive is that it is very forgiving, and I love that I can just pick it back up again and stick that back down, so I'm much happier with that. So I've got all my pieces roughly back in position, but one of the things I know that I am considering is using one of the templates out of template pack 1 because it's got a tread mark like pattern. But I haven't used this template before, so I'm just going to grab a scrap bit of paper and my little trusty piece of messy mat and give it a go, just with some regular ink. I'm not using the oxide ink, just some regular water-based ink, which is the Scarlet, of course. So I'm loving the look of that, and just going to test what it'll look like, just because I've got a lot of different textures happening over on the right hand side, and I do like that. So now I'm going to position it all so that I can do a large area around that main photo. So I've got my messy mat in place. I'm just going to use a little bit of repositionable tape, and away I go. I've got my mini foam applicator just sort of tilted, so I'm using one side of that, and I'm just sort of pushing it into the grooves because the holes in this template are quite small. Continually sort of lifting that up to see where I'm at. And the great thing about this is it's easier to match the pattern, so I've just moved it up a little bit, continue along each side, because of course the photo mat and embellishments will cover a large piece in the centre. Continually working my way up the page, and I can just keep repositioning that and filling out that area so that it's going to be all around that photo and main piece. Using stencils to put a bit of a pattern on the back of the page is a really fun thing to do. It's really easy, and I love that we can do so much with it in terms of just simply using your water-based inks like this, or you can use the Distress Oxides if you're trying to blend and match them in. So I think I'm pretty happy with that, and I start to lay back down everything, and then when I notice that a lot of that is covered and there's just one more piece there, so I did off camera just move everything back and do one more line of the stencil on the right hand side there just to fill in that gap, because a large piece of what I've just put down in the template is covered, and I'm much happier with that now because the motorbike rider down the bottom has plenty of room to move. I'm going to put a bit of foam tape on the back of that main mat. I don't stick it down straight away, but by popping it up, it's going to help to feature it, give it some dimension, and allow me to start sticking things down underneath quite easily. Now, it might look like I'm a bit non-committal often in my layouts, but I do find that by moving around the layout and going through different phases or different parts of the layout, it allows my thoughts to, I guess, formulate, and one idea spins off another. And you'll see this a couple of times throughout this layout. But I'm ready to commit to this piece, so sticking that Smarty Pants paper down, and I'm going to get ready to stick the pieces of the dot Slimline down. So I'm going to have to get, I won't have to use the glue this time. I do grab my messy mat because obviously even rolling adhesive over this, the adhesive would run through onto my page. So, but because this is going to be underneath, I can just stick a few bits underneath or in the bottom part of that. I'm actually going to let the top bit stick up, so it's really got some dimension there. I'm going to do the same for the piece at the bottom. I'm not showing a lot here, and I don't actually want it to be straight. I want it to look like two separate pieces as it is, so I'm not bothering about lining up there at all. And it's about right now I realise just how squeaky my chair is. I hope that hasn't been annoying you, but you won't be hearing it for the rest of the video because I have changed my chairs. So we're just about all stuck down, and then we'll be able to move on to that left-hand page. So off camera, I have matted one of the feature photos, or the smaller photo, on the left-hand page, just so that I've got some of that scarlet carried across. And I love this title out of the stamp set that I'm using. It says, "The best things in life mess up your hair." It's a joke that my husband laughs about all the time because he shaves his head. And whilst it's funny, and I actually do like it stamped in red, it's not going to suit the tone of my layout. So instead I have created a title which said, "Have wheels, will ride," because that's the story I'm going to be telling, and I've cut them using the Slimline alphabets, thin cuts. So I just need to work out how to incorporate them. I'm trying out some white, and I don't mind it on the white. It's got better visibility. I'm trying it out now on the Smarty Pants, but that is just not enough contrast at all. And I've just got to work out how to incorporate a piece of that Smarty Pants up in the left-hand corner and the title. And then I think about the more of the template or look, or the stencil look. So I'm just making sure that these letters will look all right if I have stenciling underneath. And I like the look of that. So I'm now going to move that all off. But just before I do, I'm going to bring in a piece of the Smarty Pants down the right-hand side. This is my brain working again. It's like sometimes I need to park an idea that I know is going to work, but I still haven't worked out how to use the Smarty Pants up the top left. And it's another pivotal point, but because when I come back down and include this bit down the bottom, the idea of the small piece with an angle gives me an idea of what I can also do up in the top left-hand side. Because once I place down the Slimline alphabets, there's actually a similar angle on the opposite direction that will feature up there. So this is what I mean by sometimes sort of working around your page, not getting too bogged down in one area, auditioning pieces, but maybe coming back to it. That's just how my brain works. It works for me, so maybe it'll work for you. I'm still not happy now though. The Smarty Pants piece is actually a little bit big, or feels too big with the dot Slimline. So I grab another piece that I had sitting on my page, and that's when it feels a little bit more balanced in terms of the piece of the dot Slimline as well. So I know I'm going to be happy with that and the angle, so I'm just marking out a little bit of pencil line because this is all going to be covered, and then I can take everything off and get that template out and do another big area with the template and my Scarlet ink. And I don't go very far with this on the film. I do a lot of it off camera, but just showing you how I get set up and get started. And that sets me up, and the rest of it with the magic of film is done off camera. So now I can go back to that pencil line. I have cut the piece of Smarty Pants. I can position it very easily exactly as I had it, so I know that my ABC is going to fit in, and I've moved very quickly through that because we're already a long way into this film. You notice that I still haven't stuck the photos down. Does anyone else do that? I'm one of these people that lays all my photos down and seems to embellish everything around the photos, and then at the last minute stick my photos down, which I feel like is probably a little bit backwards. I'm using my glue, my trusty glue again, and my messy mat. I just show you a couple of them here, and then they're all stuck down nicely. I have stamped the smaller words, the words have and will, and I've just stamped those with the Stacey Julian handwriting stamp set. I love using this for the smaller words, and I usually just pop those up on a little bit of foam tape. I've just measured out the dot Slimline piece and get ready to stick that. Now this time I am going to have to use the glue. I don't want the pieces of roll-on adhesive to stick down, and I start to work my way around, and then all of a sudden realise that there's a nice straight line that runs diagonally across these, and it's much easier to put the glue. So there's my tip for you. Just follow that diagonal line down. I want a fair bit of glue on that because I want it to stick all the way down, but I don't want the glue to ooze through as I press it down. So now I can pick that up, trying not to get glue on my fingers. And as I press it down, it sort of looks like the glue oozes, but it actually doesn't. I think it's only one little hole that it does. It's just the white, black and white paper underneath that is poking through the holes or peeping through the holes, so it looks like glue. Now I have another little play with these stamped tread marks and start to get a feel for how these are going to fit in. But I also remember that I've done nothing with the mix-in, which I set out to do, but it has all these words on it. Some of these are phrases like chance to celebrate, beauty in the ordinary, cherish today, but you can also just use the individual words. So I decided to cut an inch off the bottom. I figure an inch will give me plenty of phrases that I can see in there. There's actually probably about 2.5 inches before it repeats that I can see. I'm cutting each of these into strips, and then I'm going to grab the couple of words or phrases out that I like the look of that will fit in with my layout. One of these is Be Courageous and Say Yes to New Adventure. And I also come back later and find another little one which says Believe. But there's so many words on here that you could use. So I've chopped those up individually, and I'm still trying to work out how they fit in with the tread mark. But I actually come back and end up putting it underneath. The longer one that I've got on the left-hand side says Together is the best place. And because on the left-hand side this is the photos of my son and husband together, I figure that's the best place for that one. So I'm almost ready now to finalise things. And I now want to bring down just another piece of that dot slimline, just a small piece, and I've cut that off camera. Getting ready to stick down these tread marks. I'm using one full piece on the side, and I've got a half piece that I've stuck down off camera. And I am almost ready to start sticking down all these little embellishments. It takes me a while to commit to these things. Are you like that? And it's now that I get an idea to stick this underneath as if it's continuing through, a little bit like it is on the bottom. So now I can see that these two words or phrases fit well, and that's when I realise that I probably need a third one just to give me a cluster of 3, and I grab another one, and that is perfect and all stuck down. I'm coming for the home straight now, and I figured that the journaling box or an area for journaling would fit nicely in that open space with just a small piece of the Smarty Pants. I'm a bit of a do-it-by-eye person. I've got plenty of this Smarty Pants, so I'm not cautiously cutting. It's a little bit wide, so I cut a little bit more off. And then out of many mistakes, or sometimes just happenings like this one, it was a little bit longer than I really needed it. I like the idea of the motorbike coming up onto that journal box. So when I cut the white, I keep that a little bit shorter, but I do keep it long enough so that the motorbike goes up onto that, so it doesn't look like it's just sitting there. And once I've stuck that down, I'm going to do my usual little trick of drawing around the journal box with my 0.3 marker, which is my favourite to use, just keeping my elbow in place there and moving my arm like a windscreen wiper across. It's the easiest way I find to get a reasonably straight line. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfect. And once I've done that, of course, that's when I start to look at the rest of the edges and think, now, is there somewhere else that I can draw the lines? It's my go-to at the moment, can't help myself. Just another little bit of the tread tie there to stick under the edge. And now I'm just looking at these two corners where the black cardstock isn't on the edge, because there's a lot of area where it is, and I'm just drawing that round right up to the edge of that paper. And I'm going to zoom in now and just slow it down to regular speed, so you can see how I lock my elbow in and just very slowly move my arm across like a windscreen wiper, keeping my wrist as much as I can straight. So I'm super happy with the final result. I've got my triangular clusters up near the title, in the middle with the photo and the words, and then down the bottom in the road. I haven't used much of the mix-ins, but I'm really happy to have used some of the Smarty Pants, and I think it all comes together nicely. Come back again and watch another process video. See you soon.